This is Bruce Partle of Socialist Action, and this is the last segment of 4 talks on the U.S. economy, the global economy, where they have been, where they are today, and projections as to where they are heading. The last segment ended with forms of fraud that I enunciated and tried to explain, such as pump and dump schemes. A mistake that I made regarding pump and dump schemes is that I mistakenly called Mark Zuckerberg. I called him Mark Zuckerman. It's Mark Zuckerberg. Okay. In any event, the IPO, the initial public offering that made Facebook a member of the stock exchange, was for $104 billion. Okay. Everybody the top tier of investors who sold these stocks knew damned well that the assets of Facebook were not nearly that big, and that it will probably never bring in the kind of advertising revenue, for example, that would put it at the top and maybe even establish it as a new model for investment. So I wanted to make that clear. As all of you know, there's also offshore banking, and until recently, Swiss banking. The Swiss banks are actually now monitoring fraudulent behavior and the processing, for example, of cartel drug money. The Sunday Press Democrat recently said, and as we're broadcasting, it's mid-December. I'm from Santa Rosa, California, that the real estate business is picking up. So there it is, yet another hope that there can be another bubble, slowly but surely created. Then recently, there were incredibly light fines, both to BP, British Petroleum, and HSBC, which is an English bank. HSBC was nailed on laundering drug cartel money, and in so doing actually breaking a whole manner of procedures in banking that were illegal. They were fined $1.9 billion, the highest fine ever leveled on a bank, and yet one can imagine the billions and billions more that this bank made, and that, well, drug cartels made. What I'm then now going to move on to are predictions for the future. Many of you, or a few of you anyway, maybe have heard of Nouriel Roubini. He is an NYU professor and an economist, and is very famous because he gave the most accurate prediction of the September 2008 financial collapse, and has been labeled Dr. Doom ever since. Well, he's been fairly silent since then. When he gives reports on the economy, it's kind of in the range of like, oh, so far, so good, but actually not so good, because after all, we are in a real recession. And the reality is this: that statistically, there may be growth going on, but it's growth since the crash. To really be in a recovery, you have to get back to the place before the crash happened or the beginning of the recession happened, and we're nowhere near that, nowhere near it. So Roubini, in any event, now has voiced another prediction for 2013. And because of the European sovereign debt crisis and general banking crisis and the social crises that are emerging there, and Spain and Greece come to mind most of all, since they both have unemployment rates of over 25% and have workers pouring out into the streets by the hundreds of thousands. Anyway, a convergence of circumstances, according to Roubini, will produce what he calls the perfect storm for an economic collapse that will exceed the economic collapse that occurred in September of 2008, which really originated in the United States and slowly spread. This time, global effects all at once will be felt much, 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 much sooner. Dean Baker is yet another economist, a left liberal economist, who long predicted that we were going into recession because he knew damn well that real estate prices could not go up forever. And real estate basically was the bubble that sustains the U.S. Economy and the investor economy through the 2000s, up until 2008. And of course, as mentioned before, they invented all kinds of very fanciful investment interests, which were really investments that were investments on other investments, which are called derivatives, such as banks selling their collection of mortgages and chopping them up into securities and selling them to security holders, something that's been made very difficult in terms of who really owns the house. If you've got a house that has 1,000 investors in it, for example, how do you do that? And yet the whole business is starting up again. As I've mentioned before, the reason that there has not been a ceasing of investments in very risky financial instruments is because we are in a position where overproduction will happen at the snap of the fingers once we go back to running the factories, running the things that produce things in the real economy. One has to be very, very clear that finance, real estate, and insurance are not real parts of the economy in the sense that they don't produce anything. They produce interest, usury, and basically fines on us, fees on us, that are not going to culminate in a very good picture. Another economist, Jack Rasmus, who's local, also is a very accurate predictor of the 2008 collapse. And he had predicted in 2008, months before the collapse occurred, that the United States and perhaps the world would be entering what he called an epic recession. And he used that term because he thought of an actual depression, really meaning an official unemployment rate that would be, say, 16% or higher. And he correctly predicted that the official unemployment rate would be double digit. And that's what happened for many months after the crash, which the United States did not emerge from until, I believe, the following June in 2009. Last but not least, there's actually the socialist organization period, organization itself, which also predicted economic collapse. When the Bear Stearns, which was an investment bank, bailout occurred in February of 2008, from that point on, Socialist Action was very certain that a crash was coming, and because bailouts would not be inevitable for every single bank. And lo and behold, when the bailout of Lehman Brothers was canceled, was negated, was not given permission for, then all the banks started panicking because they all knew they had these terrible assets, especially mortgage securities, that were now worth 25 cents on the dollar as they started selling to each other like crazy, or selling to the public, often an innocent public, and so on and so forth. So, what is to be done? And what I'm going to do is read items of a program that is really a program of solution. And I'm going to read this program that is based on Socialist Action's program for recovery. We say this because we absolutely don't believe that there are any reforms in which there will be a redistribution of contact and in which people will be able to secure higher employment.